What is the most horrific thing that someone has told you super casually? I was driving my brother's friend somewhere, and he decided to tell me that when he was in grade school, he came home one day to find that his dad had committed suicide by shooting himself in the head with a shotgun. Bro's friend didn't know what to do, so he just climbed onto his dad's lap and sat there looking at him until his grandma showed up 4 hours later. I'd only met him once before, and he told me the story unprompted. I didn't know how to respond other than to say how sorry I was. I was on a date with this girl, and we drove by a fast food joint and a shared parking lot. She deadpan said, "My mom used to park here and shoot heroin with her BF while me and my brother sat in the backseat." Me, oh, wow. I was a heroin baby my mom was using while she was pregnant. Me, oh. A relative told me about killing man who was attempting to rape him in the back of a truck once casually over drinks. Edit because English is confusing. The rape did not occur casually over drinks. The conversation did. I called my cousin, and at the beginning of the convo I asked what she was doing. She said, "Oh, just standing at the counter looking at my hand." I thought it was a little weird, but my cousin is a little weird, so I forgot about it. Anyway, half an hour later she goes, "The blood has now stained my shirt. I think I should hang up and go to the I was like, "What?" So she replied, "Oh, I stabbed myself with the meat cleaver 10 minutes before you called, and the knife is still in my hand. I'm fine, but my shirt is now ruined." A couple of years ago I was on one of those music festival cruises. I was sitting down waiting on my friends to finish their drinks and whatnot when this lady sits down next to me. Somehow we get to talking about dogs. I tell her about mine. She tells me that hers is a comfort dog. I didn't ask her to elaborate because it wasn't any of my business, but she tells me it's because she didn't leave her house for 5 years. Again, I didn't ask why. She went on to tell me, a perfect stranger who'd been talking to her for all of 5 minutes, that her ex-boyfriend was stalking her and broke into her house, so she had to shoot him and kill him. Dude whipped out a picture from his suit. It was of a naked woman spread eagle on a bear rug. He said girls will do all sorts of things for a quick buck, and if interested, we could go in for a photo shoot. Never met him before or since. He was like showing me his favorite pet. Lawyer here. I was representing a teenaged boy charged with molesting a younger relative. His mother told me, "What's the big deal? I was molested as a kid, and it didn't hurt me." That he was going to prison for burning down a church. I had seen this guy about 10 times since the supposed accident. We were all hanging out, and he said, "Guess what?" and that was that. Edit. This happened in South Texas for anyone wondering. Edit. And I'll add that he tried to gauge his girlfriend's eyes out, burned down her house, and killed her 2 dogs. This guy had never raised his voice once. This was seriously out of left field. I was joking with an acquaintance once, and he told me that he was going to move in a couple of months. We weren't really close enough for me to care, but I asked him why out of pure curiosity. In the same breath, without hesitation, he told me that he had been in the foster system all his life despite knowing his biological dad personally. His dad was some big businessman in New York City and didn't have the time to raise a son. He had been with 11 different families in 15 years, and in each one he prayed he'd get adopted. It never happened. The family that he was with at that moment told him they were thinking about adopting him, but changed their minds last minute. Now he's in a constant state of expecting to move, because he just assumes that no one will ever want to adopt him. If you're reading this, I hope you're doing good, Michael. When I was 20 something back in the 90s, I was sitting on the front steps of my condo waiting for my sister's husband to pick me up. Nice old fellow, a tenant of my building, sat down next to me. His first sentence he'd ever spoken to me was, "Did you hear that they are taking my testicles off on Thursday?" I responded that I had not. He continued, "Yep, don't use them much anymore after the missus died." Mercifully at that moment my brother-in-law drove up. Supervisor at work, Dwayne had his baby yesterday. Me, oh great. Boy or girl? Supervisor dead. And Ash X200B. Like WTF. Really? Poor guy and his wife had a stillborn. My therapist told me how she ran 2 people over, killing one and paralyzing the other during our first meeting. When I was in college, there was this guy who would hang around me sometimes that seemed just a little bit off. But he was nice, and we both had similar interest, so we hung out. One day, after I hadn't seen him for weeks, he tells me it's because the police were interviewing him. He tells me this story. Him and his 2 friends were in the woods, shooting a .22 pistol. Friend #3 tries to fire, and it doesn't go off. Friend #3 looks into the barrel to check the gun. The gun then goes off, firing the round in there, and then the next round, shooting him twice in the face. You read that correctly. 3 guys went into the woods with a .22 pistol, 2 walked out, and the 3rd was shot twice in the face and died. Anyone who knows anything about guns knows this is basically impossible. But since Guy and friend #2 both had the same story, and the cops had no way to prove otherwise, no charges were filed. I stopped hanging out with that guy. Forever. I once asked my grandfather, "How you doing, grandpa?" And he said, "Not good, not good. I moved my bowels 3 times already today. Went to the doctors, and they put a tube in my penis." Should I mention we were at a family funeral? I had just met this person, and she told me that she was almost raped by one of her ex-boyfriends who followed her across the country and was hiding outside of her house in the dark before attacking. I don't even know how we got on the subject, or why she told me something so personal. I was on a date with a girl and everything was going okay. Not amazing, but definitely still in the range of a second date. At some point, the conversation wasn't even sexual. She said that one of her favorite memories was regularly letting an older guy tie her up in the backseat and drive around, sharing her with random people off the street when she was 15. It was at that point I decided there would not be a second date. Coach bus driver was like, "Sorry, the bus was late, guys. The traffic was caused by someone who committed suicide by walking into traffic." Looks at one of the passengers getting off the bus. "You remember the blood skid marks, right?" All of us, who were waiting at the bus station, were like, WTF. Guy said it like he sees it every day or something. I have homicidal intrusive thoughts. They border on impulses and I often feel like I'm being pulled towards them. I walked out on a date in the middle of a movie because I couldn't stop thinking about strangling her. To be fair, we were at a mental hospital. A guy I worked with said that in the late 80s he lived with 5 other guys in an apartment in New York. Sometime after the HIV test is developed, all of the roommates agree to get tested. Apparently the results were mailed to them. Basically, one guy got the mail and opened everyone's test. In so doing, he finds out one of the roommates has HIV. He shows the test results to every roommate except the guy who is HIV positive. Then they destroy the test results. They all pack their stuff and abandon apartment and the HIV positive guy. None of them ever spoke to the HIV positive roommate again. They never told him his test results. The guy I worked with laughed so hard telling me this story. It's fucked up. The guy I worked with had no remorse or a second of compassion even 30 years later, and knowing the HIV positive roommate probably died. Who knows how many people the unknowing HIV positive guy may have unknowingly transmitted HIV to before he had serious symptoms. JP, if you're reading this, fuck you. Heartless bastard. They randomly told me details about them being molested in the middle of our first date. That her dad was a sheriff, raped her on the regular, and she had many miscarriages because of it. I think it was our 3rd day working together. We had a shift alone, and she was a talker. Usually she spouted nonsense, but she busted the above out, like she was telling me how her dad taught her to ride a bike. I was speechless and kept my head down in my work while she started on another topic. I later learned she was a pathological liar, but I had never really heard rape mentioned casually, and it threw me off. Taxi driver was a jerk, bragging about how he had taken advantage of a drunk girl he picked up in the party zone of the city. It was the most uncomfortable taxi ride of my life. I usually work with kids in facilities. We had a boy come in, about 10 years old. They had him on a 72-hour hold because he threatened to kill a classmate at school. We got those often, and most times it was just a kid being a kid and ends up being caught, and we are forced to treat it as real. No big deal. Well, it actually was a huge deal. He would keep fidgeting in his chair and on the ground. I'd always say, Tom, try to keep still, okay? Or, Tom, if you are getting restless, you can walk around the table if that helps. At lunch I was asking him how he was doing, and he said it's weird to sleep all by myself. Some families bed share with siblings, so this wasn't way out of line. I said, oh, do you sleep in bed with your sister? And then he dropped this on me. No, daddy likes to sleep in my bed, but I don't like it because it always hurts my bottom. Now I'm like, fuck in my head. They tell you to not express emotion if the kid isn't so as coolly as I could. I said, oh, why is that? And he told me all about how daddy playing a poking tickle game, but he can't show me what it is because he's not allowed to tell anyone. Guys, I wanted to cry. We ended up having to take him to the emergency room for an anal exam, which confirmed his dad had been anally raping him for so long that he couldn't remember a time it didn't happen. That's only one of many horrible stories I have from that job, and now I need a drink. Just remembering it makes me feel sick and shaky with anger. I hope his dad is slowly tortured for the rest of his life.